Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to episode 99 of Sports Management Podcast, the third best sports business podcast in the world. Before we start, I just want to ask you all for a very small favor. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it on Spotify and Apple and give it a 5-star rating. It would help me very much in getting it visible to more people out there. Thank you. Moreover, this episode is sponsored by InSport Education, the online business school for sport. The best way to elevate your sports career, except for listening to this podcast, is to take part in InSport Education's courses and programs. InSport Education is offering sports management podcast listeners 10% off all of their courses with the code SportsManagementPodcast10. Click the link in the description below and elevate your sports business career today. Now, today's guest is Adam White, the founder and CEO of Front Office Sports. Adam started Front Office Sports when he went to the University of Miami and had no idea at the time how big it would get. Adam was working at a restaurant to finance Front Office Sports in the beginning before he managed to attract funding. Today, Front Office Sports is a major player in sports media with website, podcast, newsletter, original content, job postings, and more. Last year, their earnings were close to 8 digits, and Adam's view on the future is clear. Get ready to learn how he started Front Office Sports, what it is like to be a young CEO, selling 20% of the company to Crain Communications, how he spent $40 on the former Front Office Sports logo, and much more. Adam White, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thanks, Marcus. It's great to be on. Appreciate you having me.
I'm very excited to talk to you. I'm a big fan of what you do. And for those who might not know who you are the founder and CEO of Front Office Sports. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Front Office Sports?
Yeah, of course. Front Office Sports is essentially a multi-platform media company. We cover the influence of sports on business and culture. The easiest way I always describe it to whoever I'm talking to is if Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg and ESPN had a baby, that's us. So we're covering everything that's happening off the field, court, playing surface, etc. when it comes to the business and money around sports. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about it. That I've been running business now for it'll be 9 years in July. Started it at the University of Miami when I was a freshman going into my sophomore year. And yeah, it's been kind of a whirlwind ever since. And it's fortuitously the only business I've ever really known. I have done some internships in the past and everything like that. But yeah, on my side of things, it's definitely been the love kind of the last 9 years, labor of love of the last 9 years. And, overall, it's been really good so far.
Great to hear. And it's an interesting story how it started. So you mentioned there you went to University of Miami, graduated in 2017. And you started interviewing for some jobs at some GBs, I think, and didn't get some of those. And then you reached out to Russell, who is the co-founder, right?
Yep.
From there, what did you tell him and how did you decide to start Front Office Sports?
Yeah, I mean, well, I already started Front Office Sports at the time that Russ and I had connected, but it was really in its nascent form. And basically what I had said in the chat was, hey, I have this thing, Front Office Sports. I think it could potentially be something, but not really sure. Would love for someone else to kind of help out with it. It could be a fun class project or a fun project while we're in school, maybe help you meet a few people, whatever. So that's what I said. Russ was the only person who responded. But yeah, I mean, at the beginning, Front Office Sports was really just an informational interview platform where I sat down with people almost similarly like this. And I asked them, how did you get into sports? What's your background? What's your career advice? All this, that, and the other. And then I started publishing the interviews. And so I did 110 informational interviews in the first year. Russ was working on the social side of things. We were working together. It was fun. And it just kind of kept going from there. But that's the very brief origin story.
Yeah. So, I mean, now it's obviously doing great. You're having over 100,000 followers on Instagram. You shared your Q1 results for this year. You have double-digit growth in newsletter openings and followers across different platforms. But it was a bit tricky in the beginning. I read that you told yourself like you give it 6 months. So how was the beginning, the infancy of Front Office Sports?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was like just a fun project, to be honest with you. The infancy was really just kind of throwing a bunch of things up against the wall and seeing what stuck. I mean, we did everything you could think of. It was informational interviews, it was contributors, it was, awards, it was this, it was that, it was this, Twitter Spaces, anything and everything we could do. Because I always tell people the craziest thing you can ever do as someone realistically in business is try and start a media company with no money, no audience, no experience, and see what happens, just because of the way you have to build a media company. You have to build the audience first, and to have an audience, you have to have people who write, and have people you write, you have to have money and all this stuff. So anyways, that's, that was the first 4 years of the business, but it was really like, it was just totally different than it is now, right? Like now it's a real news organization with real journalists, and we're breaking some of the biggest stories in the world and in the space. And, we're having a ton of fun, and we were having a ton of fun then. It was just a different time.
Yeah, I understand that. So, now you're having newsletter, podcast, website, social media, original content, job postings, like all of these things. But when you started much smaller, and then how did you grow it? Did you have a vision that you want to do all these things, or they came naturally, or when you added on these different types?
Yeah, it really came from, luckily we've been so close to our audience for a long time now. So a lot of these things came out of just our, I would say, not audience demand, but our audience requests, right? They would say like, hey, can you do this? Hey, we want you to cover more news. Hey, can you launch a newsletter? Hey, we really like this. Hey, we really like that. And so for us, I think that was the big focus, realistically, is that we just kind of kept listening to our audience. They would tell us what they wanted. They told us, hey, we want this, we want that, we want an award, we want this. And so by the time we got the investment, we were pretty confident that we knew that at least hopefully the business would be somewhat successful, because our audience for the first 4 or 5 years of the business were basically dictating a lot of what we did in terms of like products and topics, that like we looked at and that we put resources against to cover, because they were saying this is what they wanted to read more about, and this, that, and the other. So yeah, that's kind of realistically why we were able to succeed once we got the money, was because of the fact that we spent the first 4 years, 5 years-ish of the business just essentially doing market research, asking people. That's all I did. Every informational interview, I asked people, what do you like? What do you don't like? Blah, 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 blah. And they told me. And so by the time I was done, doing the informational interviews and all these things, I knew pretty well that like, if we did these things, like this would potentially work. And so that was the early foundation.
Yeah. So you mentioned funding there. So the first check you ever got was from Uni of Nebraska, right? For like $2,000.
Yeah, that was the first advertising one for sure. Yep.
Yeah. And now, it's a totally different ballpark.
Yeah.
Still 99% of the revenue is from advertisement.
Yep.
Advertisement. So that's obviously the main income, but you also run some, pro subscriptions. Is the idea to lean on the revenue from advertisements most of all, and then try these different things as well?
Yeah, I know from my perspective, and from everyone's perspective, it's about being a diversified media company, right? Advertising is great, and advertising will continue to be great, but how do we continue to build off of our success with our education business, our success in events and awards, looking at what a potential subscription, all of this stuff is like really an interesting kind of thought process and an interesting approach. And I think for us specifically, like that's what we want to do, right? Is we want to be you look at all of the best media companies, Bloomberg's, Politico's, Wall Street Journals, you name it, Financial Times, they all have advertising. They all have direct reader revenue in the form of subscription. They all have events, and they all have other, assets. And I think that's the whole thing is, once you have attention, how do you monetize that attention? And I don't think there's one right way to do it. Everyone's like, oh, advertising is the best, and oh, subscription is the best. And the truth is, it needs to be a mix, and you need to figure out how that mix works together and how you're able to continue to make sure you have a healthy business.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to have the mix, because if you only have paid subscription, maybe you lose a lot of readers or listeners, etc., that they don't want to pay for the additional content. But if you have both, you have a free version and the pro subscription, then you can get the more hardcore listeners, readers, whatever, and also keep the more casual listeners, readers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole point. How do you serve both, right? Like my Instagram audience might be very different than my TikTok audience, which might be very different than my Twitter audience, which might be very different than the audience that pays to subscribe to our editorial stuff, right? It's just I think finding ways and meeting those audience where they are is incredibly important.
You have said in another interview that providing value is your guiding light, and you're also offering some online education. You did a collab with Pepsi. So is that also one important pillar in the front office sports business?
Totally. I mean, yeah, that's the ultimate, I think, pillar in every business, right? Like you have to provide some sort of value, whether it's in the form of content, whether it's a product, whether it's ease of use, whatever it is, that your value exchanges, that's why people pay you. That's why people pay attention to you. That's why people follow you, share you, whatever. So yeah, I mean, our biggest thing has always really been about how can we provide the most amount of value possible? How can we make sure our Instagram is providing great value, our LinkedIn is providing great value, great information, right? Because our value is really in the information, right? So how can we make sure that the information, not only are we providing it, that it's almost a one-stop shop for people. They feel like they can go there and they feel like they can do these things. It's really just about, that plus mixing that with all of our original stuff, with all the other things that we have going on. So, I think that's how we approach it. And then also like the value in the course business, right? The course business is a great example of the fact that the brand is so trusted that we can launch an online education platform in front office sports learning. People can take the classes and feel so confident in the quality of the brands that they will post it on LinkedIn. They'll put it on their resume. They'll put it on, there are different platforms and say, I'm so excited to have taken this course by front office sports to do this, that, and the other, right? All of that stuff. And so, I think for us, like that's been the big thing. And I think that's been, one of the biggest things that we've been able to do, hopefully, is we really have a brand that means a lot and that matters, and we take it extremely seriously. And that's the biggest thing, is we take the brand from the content to the look and the feel to the coverage to how we show up on social to how we show up in your inbox, right? We take it extremely seriously. And I think that's because of that is why a lot of the success we've had.
I'm sure. And you're definitely one of the big players now. I listened to an interview in 2019 with you, and you said that you don't compare yourself with Bleacher Report, CBS, etc. But I mean, right now, shouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously Bleacher Report and all these other businesses have much larger scale than we do, and other things. So I don't think comparison, oftentimes, I think is the saying is comparison is the thief of joy. I think at the end of the day, you can look at them and you can be inspired by them, but comparing ourselves to a Bleacher Report that has raised $100 million, I think in the past, don't quote me on that, but I think it's between $50 and $100 million, is owned by Turner, has mass resources. It's impossible. I mean, there's just no way. I think we can aspire to be things like the Wall Street Journal or like Bloomberg, but Bloomberg has a copy editing desk that's as big as our entire company, right? And that's just one part of their thing. So I think like those are things that you can't get caught up in. And I think you can use as inspiration and make sure that like you look at it and say, I want to look and feel and be like them. So like, it doesn't surprise me when I am like them, right? Like, I think that's the big thing. You have to kind of dress for the job you want in a way. And like that, in some semblance, is how we approach it. Like we want to be a Bloomberg, a Wall Street Journal, a Politico, a Financial Times. Like we want to be that level of brand. So our journalism aspirations should match that. Our brand aspirations should match that. Our execution on platforms should match that, or even be better, right? Like on Instagram, we're better than many of those places, right? Because we believe that that's a better opportunity for us. But, those brands have massive paid subscription businesses, which we haven't turned on yet and eventually will at some point. So, yeah, I think like those are the big things, is that for a long time early on in my career, I was very much like, oh, they're doing this, we should do that. Or, oh, they're doing this, we should do that. Or, oh, they're doing this, we should do that. And it never really honestly netted out in anything other than the fact that I just felt like we were chasing. And it's like, why should we chase? Like, we shouldn't chase. We should like lead. And if we're just thinking all the time about, what is XYZ person doing or what is YWP person doing versus like, what are we doing? Then that's the whole thing.
Yeah. You've come a long way, as you talked about, from 2019. You had 5 employees. I guess in the beginning was yourself, and then in 2019 you were 5 full-time employees. Now I think you're around 40. Also, Crain Communication acquired 20% of the company in early 2022. What was the goal with that they bought in there?
Yeah, I mean, for them, it just depends on who you ask, right? I think for them, it was really they wanted to signal to the market that they were being active in the space and they were starting to make some moves. It's a family-run business in Detroit. They have some big media brands that I don't think people really understand. And so I think for them, it was all about like kind of making some noise in the space and saying, hey, look, like we're going to play too. And I had met Casey a long time ago and we struck up a relationship and it's been positive ever since. And, at the end of the day, my job is to return capital to our investors, right? That's it. My job is, they invested a $25 million valuation for them to see a return. I need to sell the business one day for probably 50 million plus for them to see what they want to see. And like, that's fine. I mean, that's what you sign up for. And so, yeah, that's the kind of backstory there. And for them, I think it's, from what I've been told, is they had more people reach out to them in the day that they announced the investment than they'd ever had. And, it did exactly what they wanted to. And then obviously financially, like the goal is that the investment plays out really well. And that, they walk away with double what they put in or triple what they put in or quadruple what they put in, depending on what the outcome is.
Of course. Front Office Sports projected to earn 8 figures last year, 2022. Was that met?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely close. But, the market kind of was impacted with everything, right? So it's just the past kind of year from an advertising standpoint has definitely been tough. War in Ukraine, economic recession, all kind of happening in March of 2022, drug down a lot of different things, interest rates, just other things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. If we talk a little bit about yourself, like when you started having a startup, you do everything, right? From, marketing to writing the content to doing the interviews. But now you're in a different position. So how is your day-to-day now as the CEO and managing a larger team?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the day, right? Like yesterday was a bunch of sales meetings. Today is, more biz stuff, partnership stuff, long-term strategic planning, things around potential paywalls and subscriptions and things like that. It just really kind of depends on the day. Mondays are a lot of internal meetings, catching up on what's going on this week and meeting with our different leads of our various teams, our revenue team, our editorial team, things like that, just seeing where things are at in the business and where I can help. But oftentimes, I mean, my big thing is it really comes down to once you get to a certain point is that you're kind of always out there selling, right? And it's 3 things. You're selling advertisers, you're selling prospective employees, and you're obviously continuing to sell investors, right? And so that's where a lot of the time is spent, is how am I selling advertisers? How am I recruiting and selling prospective employees? And how am I, obviously continuing to sell either current or potential future investors?
Are you involved with all the recruitments for Front Office Sports still?
No, I wouldn't say all of them, but definitely like it depends on the level of the person and the role and everything like that. But most likely, I'll speak with them at some point in the process. But it really comes down to, we have a great people team led by Shira and Diana, and so they run point on everything. And then where needed, I will support there. But we've gotten to the point where, for the most part, it all kind of runs through them, and it's not under most circumstances something that I spend, a ton of time working on, but I will obviously help recruit others, when needed.
How would you describe your leadership style?
It's a good question. I mean, I always want to make sure that anyone on our team knows that if I ask them something, it's not something that I wouldn't do myself or haven't done myself. So that's really important to me, right? I'm usually a first person in, last person out type of person, because if I'm not that, how do I expect our employees to be that, in my opinion, right? Like, if I'm not going to be the person, and I'm not saying our employees need to show up at 7:30 in the morning, but if I'm not in the office at 7:30 in the morning and I'm not there starting to work, how do I make sure that the expectations are that, hey, look, we got a job to do and there's a lot of stuff to get done, and let's get after it. So I think that's one thing. I like to try and be as collaborative as possible. I think that's definitely something that's changed as we've gotten more executives on the team and people who have more experience and people who know things that we don't know. I think we've done a good job of knowing what we don't know and hiring people that hopefully know more than us in certain categories. So I like to think about that. I would say it's definitely, I don't know if demanding is the right way to put it, but there's high levels of expectation in terms of execution and prep. We should always be the most prepped. We should always be the most on time. We should always be the best at what we have. Our decks should look the best. Our pitches should be the best. Like, we're competing at the levels that, if we're not bringing our best, people don't care. And so our internal mantra is we don't set the bar, we raise the bar, even if we set the bar internally. Like, if we launched, you did learning, and learning was a massive success. Well, what's the next? How do we raise that bar, right? What is the thing that we can do to raise that bar? So, it's a big learning experience, right? I started this business 9 years ago, so I was 19 at the time. And now, I oversee, obviously it's a company-wide group of, 35, 36 employees. And I'm only still 28. So it's a very big difference and change and and you're learning as you go. It's a true definition of building the plane while you're flying it. So it's not perfect, by any stretch of the imagination. And I've definitely made mistakes and have approached things in the wrong manner and things like that. But, I think the one thing that everyone here knows is that as long as they are in the right and they are doing things correctly, I will have everyone's back here. I will go to the ends of the earth for them and to make sure that they are, whether it's protected, whatever it needs to be. And they know that I'm always around. If I'm here to help and support, and we'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. And so, I think that's probably pretty important parts, but they may have different POVs than do I, as all employees do.
Of course. But this was what you think. So that was a very good answer, I think, from your point of view. You mentioned your age there and that you started at a pretty young age. Of course, you cannot compare since you haven't been older than you are now, but is there any, challenges that you felt that have come with being a young CEO?
Yeah, of course. I don't think people take you as seriously, external people. There's always that question, right? Like, oh, he's just a kid, he's like, why would I listen to this 28-year-old kid? Whatever it is, 26-year-old, 25-year-old kid. So I think there's always that, but I think there's advantages. People really look up to people who had the nerve and the kind of fortitude to go out and try and do something. And so I think using that to the advantage is good, but you just got to grow up quick. Even if you're 28, you can't use the excuse that you're 28. No one's going to take it, right? You are in this position because you chose to be in this position. You wanted to be in this position. You put yourself in this position. And so because of that, you have to be in this position. Sure. Are you going to know everything that a 40-year-old public company CEO is going to know? No, it's just not going to be possible, but you're going to have to learn quickly. You're going to have to know what needs to go down, and you're going to have to live up to that seat that you're in. And if you don't, then I think that's just life, right? You chose this. And so if you chose this, then it's on you to be prepared, to be ready, to be able to execute, to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk as much as you can. And it's not going to be perfect, but hopefully you have a great board and group of stakeholders like we do that are going to support you and help you learn and things like that. Because, I never knew how to handle a board meeting. I never knew how to, send investor updates. I'd never done any of this stuff before, but now it's like, oh, okay. They help coach me through it. And now I know. So I think again, that's the other big thing too.
Yeah. And is it easier now when you have this type of proof that you have built this, and also you were Forbes 30 under 30 in the sports category? You have some, more things on the CV. Does that give you more leverage or less of this, pat on the head type of treatment?
I think it does, but I also think it still doesn't. I think when that time will come from external people is when we eventually sell the business. And that's when people will be like, okay, this, because it's, quite frankly, the only number that matters is the last number, right? And all of the valuations, all of the numbers in between 0 and 1 are fine, but people care about the last number. People care about how much you sold your business for, who you sold it to, what'd you do, blah, 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 blah. Whether that's right or wrong, it's the truth. And so I think from our perspective and my perspective, it really is, yeah, definitely. I think the fact that we have been successful and the team has done a really good job and we've built a brand that really matters. I think, yes, people take me more seriously for sure, but there's still doubt. Of course, there's always going to be doubt, right? And that's just life. But I think, yeah, it's definitely gotten better. And I do think people take us more seriously now because of what we've been able to do.
I would assume so. Yeah, you mentioned that the only thing that matters is what you sell it for. Is that the end goal at some point to sell Front Office Sports?
Yeah, of course. We have investors. So eventually you got to make them their money. So whether that's you make enough profit that you buy it back from them or that you sell to someone.
Was that a goal from the beginning as well? To, you do this for X amount of years, do the best you can and sell it for as much as possible?
No, I mean, it was never really a thought, to be honest with you. It was supposed to be a class project that got me a job and somehow it became a job.
Became a pretty good one.
Yeah, not bad. I'll take it. It's the only job I've known for the past 9 years. So, yeah, I would say it all ended up in the way it should have.
I'm happy to hear that. Something that I read that interested me very much and also reminded me of something else was that you paid $40 for the logo, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, not the logo you see today, but the original one, yes.
Oh, right. Okay, so you have changed. I don't remember if I've seen that one. I will look that up.
Yeah, it was a briefcase with balls inside the briefcase, and then there was it was a round Front Office Sports logo with a little briefcase in the middle.
It made me think of Nike. Do you know the story of the swoosh that they paid $2 an hour for some designer to do it, and then they gave them stock in a company, and now she's a millionaire. Yeah,
I don't think the Front Office Sports logo, unfortunately, is going to be as iconic as the Nike logo. But you never know. But yeah, no, it's definitely our design agency now that we work with is great, and they helped us really make it feel more premium, make it feel more polished, make it feel more professional and noticeable and dynamic, and it fits a lot of what we're doing now in the way that we want it to. Not like the old one was very junior and kind of JV, things like that.
Yeah, the one now is very nice, very clean. Looking forward now, what does the future hold for Front Office Sports?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it really comes down to, we've said this before, it's insert business brand here of sports, right? And, how do we sit here and build the Wall Street Journal of sports or the CNBC of sports or the Bloomberg of sports, right? That's the approach. We want the brand to be known both nationally and globally for our journalism, our, content, our writing. That's the foundation of the business, and everything else will kind of follow. So that's the real big focus of the next phase of the business. We have a known product without a lot of known people. And so how do we continue to layer in known people on what is a relatively known and well-respected product? So you'll see a lot more of that from us, continuing to bring on great reporters, subject matter experts, and people who can really leverage, the platform. I always tell people, Front Office Sports, the brand is what you make of it. And we have reporters who used to work at some of the biggest publications in the world who who now work for us and say and tell me like, my content on your website gets more traffic, more feedback, more response, more play than ever before. Whether I was at USA Today or whatever, New York Times, you name it, whatever. Because like that's what our audience wants. That's what our audience is looking for. We have conditioned our audience that if you want anything as it relates to the business of sports, you come to us. And when you come to us, you're going to find that, whether it's breaking news on the Washington Commanders, whether it's a tweet about the Las Vegas, all the stuff that's going on there with the Oakland A's, right? Or could be Las Vegas A's. Who knows what's going to happen? All of these things. And for us, I think that's been the big approach. And what we'll continue to lean in is we found a niche from a coverage standpoint that I think really resonates. But like niche doesn't have to mean small. It just means focused. And I think a lot of people will be like, oh, it's a niche publication. Well, yeah, sure. Whatever. You can say it's focused. Yes, we're not a broad-based news publication like the New York Times, of course. But that doesn't mean it's small. That doesn't mean people don't care about this category. We generate 150 million social impressions a month. Over 1 billion social impressions last year alone. We're doing millions of page views a month. We're doing 30 plus million newsletter opens a month. Like people care about this stuff. And it's more than just a small subset of people who happen to work for teams and leagues. And so that's the big thing that it's a lot of education. You have to spend a lot of time educating people and saying, hey, wait a second, this is a big opportunity. Like this is, flat out, full stop. This is something that I told someone the other day that like, we like to say this whole thing is our whole audience is the modern sports consumer, and the modern sports consumer cares more about what happens off the field than they do on the field. And so what we say is like, there was fantasy, there was analytics, there was betting, and now there's the business. And that's how like sports fans, they just cared about sports, and then they cared about sports and fantasy, and then they cared about sports and fantasy and analytics, and then they cared about sports, fantasy, analytics, and betting, and now they care about sports, fantasy, analytics, betting, and business. And like that's where we're on that spectrum. Is there something else that they may eventually care about? Sure. I don't know. Like who knows what's going to happen? Like people's consumer trends change, their whatever it is. But at this point, like right now, the here and now, like this is the category and this is the area that, in my opinion, really matters a lot to people. Like people care about what LeBron is doing off the field. People care that Will Ferrell is in a documentary that's, coming out about, or a comedy documentary, whatever it is. Like people care about whether or not the A's are going to be in Las Vegas. Like, I don't know.
For sure. How do you look at competition? We mentioned before, like Bleacher Report and some other, there are different things, but there are also independent creators that do these type of things. So how do you look at competition?
I mean, everything that commands attention is relative competition, right? Like whether it's a person, whether it's a brand, whatever, we just focus on what we do. At the end of the day, like I can't be caught up about a personality or a person or another brand doing what they do. Like it's going to just waste time and energy and effort when it's really not going to matter, right? So of course, like we see things and we know things and we know what's out there. But if we just stay focused on super serving our audience with the content we know that works in the ways we know they consume it, which is on the newsletter, on the site, on social and audio, everything like that. And then we allow that to have a great kind of cross section in all of that or flywheel per se. And then we sell advertisers into that and we're fine. Like we have enough to worry about ourselves to spend time worrying about competition. It's just, it doesn't make sense. So yeah, of course we're aware of it. We pay attention. We know what the numbers look like. We know all of these things. But at the end of the day, I always tell our team, like, just focus on what you can control. We can't control anything else that anyone else does, but we can control that we do. And we can control that if I'm here or someone else is here, like that we're going to always strive to be the best. And if we do that, then like everything else will work out. Everything else will work out. And I think that's what the people who really succeed here buy into, is that they're going to come here and do their best work. And if they do the best work, they're going to see the rewards of the best work.
Yeah. Looking back on your career, has there been any bumps on the road? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's always bumps. It's life, you know. You can't get through life without a few bumps in the road. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you just got to know that just because it's a bump in the road doesn't mean it's the end of the road. And you have to make sure that you can't allow a bump in the road to be the end of the road, right? Like, of course, you're going to get knocked down and you're going to miss things and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to make bad decisions and you're going to make poor choices. But as long as it's just like, you know, the old saying is like, it's, you know, if you get punched, you got to get back up. If you get knocked down and you stay down, well, then of course, you're never going to give yourself another opportunity. But if you get back up after getting knocked down, you at least got another shot. And is that next shot going to get knocked down again? Maybe, right? Like, you never know. So, yeah, I mean, look, like, you just got to keep plugging and you just got to keep going and going and going. And, you know, realistically, success in really anything is kind of like an endurance sport. Oftentimes, it's really just the person who, or the team, or the group of people who just didn't give up. The ones who got to the end of the line and was like, yeah, this, like, I'm not, no one's going to beat me, you know? And I think, like, and they just keep going, right? I think, like, that's the biggest thing. And whether that means, you know, you may have to stop for a little bit, or you may have to walk, you may not be able to run, but you may need to walk. And if you do that, everyone says they want to start a business. Everyone says they're going to do these things. The beauty is that all of that gets parsed out and the rubber meets the road when the action is needed. We've been doing this every single day for the last 10 years. There hasn't been a day in which we haven't worked on the business for the last almost 10 years. Every single day. We were tweeting, we were posting, we were doing the newsletter, we're doing something. And it compounds after a while. And now we're at a place where it's really starting to compound. But like, if we would have stopped in year 2, we'd never been here. We would have stopped in year 4. We would have never been here. If COVID would have stopped us, we would have never been here. And so I think that's the biggest thing is you just have to have, whenever you start a venture or whatever it is, the old saying is every overnight success story is 10 years in the making. And that's true. Like, unless you just happen to strike lightning in a bottle somehow. But, you know, even then, like, there was all the stuff that led up to that lightning in the bottle moment. And so I think that's the big thing is you just got to keep going. I mean, that's what I believe. If you go to relentless.com redirects to Amazon. Like, that's the whole Jeff Bezos thing is you just have to be relentless and you just have to keep going, no matter what. And, you know, if you do that, you'll likely be pretty successful in life.
Yeah, for sure. And I like to quote David Meltzer. He's a sports manager as well and a public speaker and so on. He always says that, like, the best business decision is just, you know, don't quit, don't give up. Just continue one more day. And as long as you don't quit, you haven't lost.
Exactly.
So I like that type of mentality.
Exactly.
Do you have any good advice for young people who want to break into the sports industry?
Yeah, I always tell people, I say, like, don't ask for a job. Tell people why you'll be valuable or why they should hire you. It's very difficult for me to say, you know, if you were to reach out and say, hey, you know, here's my resume. Do you have any jobs? I don't know. I'd have to look, you know what I mean? Versus, like, if you're like, hey, here's my resume, but also here's why I think you should hire me. And then you give me examples and say, hey, you know, your Instagram sucks. And I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
Like, and here's how I'm going to change it. I'm going to do this type of content. I'm going to post these types of things. I'm an expert in social short form video, and I'm going to do this, this, and this. And I think if you hired me, I'd be able to do all that stuff. Now, immediately I can be like, oh, wow. Like, they identified a problem. They identified a solution. And they told me why, like, that they are going to be the person who's able to execute that solution. For me, I'd be like, holy shit, like that. I at least maybe can say, oh yeah, you're right. Like we do need that. Or, oh, you know what, this is a great example or a great note, but we're not hiring right now or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think that's what I always tell people is, like, don't ask for a job. Tell people why they should hire you. And the outcome will likely be better 9 times out of 10 than if you just said, hey, you know, my name's Billy Bob, and, you know, I want to work for the insert team here or insert agency here. do you have any jobs available? Versus like, hey, my name is Billy Bob. I want to work for you, and this is why you should hire me. Doop, 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 doop. And it's usually going to be much more impactful, at least in my opinion.
No, I totally agree. And I've heard from several others I've spoken to as well. I spoke to Andrew Brandt, who used to be with the Green Bay Packers, and he was saying that as well. Like, bring something to show like what you will provide value with. Like,
totally
bring a writing sample or a podcast piece or an artwork if you're, in the graphics department or whatever.
Yeah.
Just show something like what you can provide.
Exactly. 100%.
So I really like that. Adam, I'm a big fan of what you do, Front Office Sports. I'm a subscriber to the podcast, newsletter, all of your content. I really appreciate you taking the time. But before I let you go, the last question that I ask everyone is, if you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who do you think that I should talk to?
Oh, the next guest. That's a good one. It'd be really cool to talk to like Adam Silver or something like that. Hear what got going on the media side of things with the NBA. I think that'd be a good one. But NWSL commissioner would be a good one. Jessica Berman.
Jessica Berman. Yeah. She's very high on my list.
Yeah, she'd be a really good one.
Yeah.
Talk to her media rights. I think those are a couple good ones.
Yeah, that's two great ones. Hope to make that happen. Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Yeah, of course, man. Appreciate you having me on, and best of luck with everything. Looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.